guys, and welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm actually joined with a fellow author, one of my friends. She's an awesome author, and she's going to be a guest on today's show. This is Lydia May. She is an indie author. She's self-published 2 books so far. One of them is called To Break a Silence. It's a little story retelling written with other authors. It's called One Must Die, and it's a murder mystery. It's actually for YA, so and don't worry, it's clean and it's a really cool book. It's written by quite a few of them. They joined in and did that together, so I think you guys ought to check it out. I'm super excited to read it. She's been a great example to me of what it truly means to be a Christian, and I really look up to her, and I'm super excited to hear her thoughts with us today. So, welcome, Lydia. Thank you again for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so usually when I was asking other authors to be guests on the show, I had a topic in mind for them. But with Lydia, I felt really impressed to just ask, what is something that you think the author community could hear? Or what do you think is something that we all struggle with and that we need to hear more about and talk about? And so she came out with a topic of comparison. And I know that a lot of us authors struggle with comparison. It seems like sometimes we're going too slow. It seems like we're behind, or it just seems like everybody else is doing well. And I know social media puts a lot into that. But anyways, we want to hear your thoughts on it. So, what is your experience with comparison, and what advice or tips do you have for other authors to not compare themselves to others?
Yeah. Like you said, I think every author has had experience in comparing themselves to others in one way or another. In fact, I think it's nearly impossible not to when you consider even how Amazon ranks books in their systems. All the other bestseller lists out there and social media showing us everyone's successes, right? I'd agree with you there that I think it's something that pretty much anyone who goes into writing, they're going to face this.
Yeah.
And so let's take Amazon, for example. Once you've started publishing, it doesn't take long to see where your book is ranking and the books around you on the list. And of course, the very natural thing is to want to root that your book will beat out all the other books and make it to the top, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just in our culture. It's always look at numbers, look at sales, look at followers, look at royalties, ratings, rankings, and that sort of thing. This is how we're pretty much all tempted to judge our success.
Yes.
So I think, especially when you see someone writing very similar to you and in all the same circles as you, and then they're suddenly taking off and ranking high with all their books and getting like thousands of social media followers, and wow, they're just like killing it. And as a career author, in those kinds of situations, it can be hard not to feel like they found some sort of secret sauce and you'll never figure it out and feel like a failure from comparing where you are currently. You asked what is my experience with comparison. And so to share that, I'd have to share like a little bit of how I even got involved with writing because I always wanted to be a career author since I was a little kid. And then as a teen, everyone talked about publishing as if it was some unachievable thing. I'm sure you've faced this too, Lay, where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm going to be an author someday. And people are like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
tough luck. There is this kind of perception that a very tiny, rare percentage of anyone who went after publishing would actually be accepted. And that if you did, you won the lottery or something. That thought for me was always very intimidating. So even though I was always writing, I didn't have the courage to really deeply research the steps necessary to publish. And like you see in movies and television, miraculous moments when a
Yeah.
character gets a publishing deal and like it
Yeah.
changes their whole life or something.
Yeah, no, I know me.
I was like, oh, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always writing and exploring all these stories, but afraid of digging into what publishing looked like. And then, but when I decided, you know what, like I need to figure out how to be serious about this
Yeah.
if I want to go down this path. So I started joining Facebook groups for writers. And that's when I started seeing people posting things like total strangers, because I was in these giant groups.
Yeah.
Then they would say things like, oh, my agent said such and such or whatever, or
Mhm.
I just signed with the publisher. And I was like, oh, wow, people are actually doing this. You know, this was even before I had any clue about indie publishing, right?
Oh, yeah. Huh?
I didn't even see that yet as like a realistic option. So at first, it was like a bunch of strangers, and I would say these things, and it was, oh, that's a hope filled thing.
Yeah.
But as you begin to get into like more niched down groups, you start to see the same people repeatedly, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
start to feel like, oh, we're on this same journey and we're on the
Yep.
same path and like we're peers, right? So then
Mm-hmm.
when suddenly it's your peer that's, well, I just signed with the publisher and I just got my agent, or I just published my debut and look at all this. When it's someone that like you felt like you were in head to head, the truth is that in that moment, there's a greater temptation to be like, wait, what do they have that I don't? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
So that is where the danger of like the envy or jealousy monster can come.
Yeah.
That, it doesn't always look like, envy doesn't always look like, oh, I hate their success, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes envy looks like, oh man, I'll never be able to do what they're doing. And sometimes we can think, okay, that person and I, we were on the same page and now suddenly they're successful. We were doing the same things. And then you realize, actually, we weren't doing the same things. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, maybe some people that I thought I was on the same page with who were then suddenly getting these publishing deals, they were spending their hard earned savings, going to conferences and spending hours
Mm-hmm.
refining their pitches and perfecting their book proposals. And maybe that's not a step that I had reached yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it was intimidating. Or those who published their debut independently and had all this success. What we don't see is all the hours of research that went into preparing for a book launch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one author, they are publishing their first book and they just went into KDP, just put it, didn't really communicate with anybody or anything like that. And so they're like, shocked that there's no sale, and they see someone else and it's also their debut book and they have hundreds of
Yeah.
sales and they may be like, what do they have that I don't? And so they're not seeing what's going on in the background, right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
we see is just this, what looks like a magical success.
Yeah. So true. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is easier to envy what someone else has when we don't know what it took to get there,
Mm-hmm.
or when we lack the courage to go and do what they're doing. So, for me, in comparison, I would say the biggest mindset shift that has had to happen for me is, instead of looking at someone else's accomplishments and wondering, oh, how did they figure all that out and get it all together? And why are they better or maybe more likable or more talented than I
Mm-hmm.
am? Or I've heard with social media, why have they suddenly been blessed by the algorithm? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having those sort of questions, stop when we see someone's success and say, wow, look what's possible. If I will step out and be courageous, look what is possible if I won't give up. Look what is possible if I keep learning and investing in my craft and talking with people who know what they're doing and taking their advice. When we go at it from that mindset, comparison in that case can almost be a good thing. When I say comparison being a good thing, let's think about it like, let's say you had to choose between two authors to learn from, okay? And they've both been writing and self publishing for 5 years, and they have both published about 15 books. And one has an average of 5 reviews per book and is still investing more in their books than what they're making. And the other has an average of 2,000 reviews per book and has made a career out of it. And you have to choose, who am I going to go to for advice? Just one of these two. And if your goal is to be a career author, you most likely want to learn from the one who was able to make a career out of it, right? It's like that kind of comparison is actually something I think we are made to be able to do, but we have to have humility in it
Mm-hmm.
in order to keep from using that comparison as a way to self degrade.
Mm-hmm.
Because a big player in getting trapped in the comparison game is when we're too prideful to ask for help or accept advice or adjust our ways.
I love that. I love how you're like saying it can be constructive. Like
Right.
comparison can actually be constructive. You can look at what other people are doing and how they're succeeding. I actually have this quote that I think is really relevant to this. This is a quote by Baron P. Stanfield. He says, when we compare ourselves to others, there can only be two results. Either we will see ourselves as better than others and become judgmental and critical of them, or we will see ourselves as less than others and become anxious, self critical, and discouraged. Comparing ourselves to others is rarely productive, not uplifting, and sometimes downright depressing, right? In fact, these comparisons can be spiritually destructive, preventing us from receiving the spiritual help we need. And then he says, on the other hand, emulating those who demonstrate Christ like attributes can be instructive and uplifting and can help us become better disciples of Christ. And I would say, just like emulating those good things that you see other authors are doing, that's going to help you be a better author instead of putting yourself down or being judgmental or critical. So I really love what you shared right there. I think that's really important for authors to remember.
And I think it helped to have a lot of author friendships.
Mhm.
Have friendships with those who are in every stage along the writing path. Have friends who are just starting out. Have people who are in the same place as you, and have people who are way ahead of you. So you can see, okay, this is a journey, and all of our paths are going to be a little different.
I love that because also, like, you can learn so much from someone who's ahead of you, but I feel like you're contributing too when you have someone who's behind you. There's that saying to help the next one in line, and I'm such a like cheerleader for that because I don't know, we've been given so much, and when you start out, there's so many resources out there. So why don't
Yeah.
you be that person for somebody else? You know what I mean? So I feel like that helps the comparison too.
I'm so thankful for those that have supported me because I'm still in the early stages of my writing journey. I feel like for someone who released their debut and now their second, like I've been able to see a decent level of success that honestly I didn't expect. And I know that it's because of those who have been so supportive
Mhm.
and helpful who have experience.
Yes. And I love that because so actually for the people who are watching this, Lydia and I were in a series together, a multi-author collaboration called The Shadow Tales. And they're a series of fairy tale retellings. I did a Small Light retelling and she did a Little Mermaid retelling. And I just remember, I felt like I learned so much from Lydia's example. Just like she was always asking questions, she was contributing to the conversation. I even remember one time she posted in our Facebook group and she asked, what is some indie advice that you guys have for me, or somebody along those lines? And I remember everyone was commenting some really great things. And I remember reading it and thinking, this is helpful for me too. But I remember one of the authors commented and she said, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just learning and figuring it out too. And I thought that was such a good answer because how many of us are like that but don't want to say it? And I think that's what, like you said earlier, to show some humility, be willing to learn, be willing to seek advice, just like how Lydia did in our group. And I think others will learn with you. There's that saying that you can all rise together. And I believe that's true with authors. When you have that community and you're willing to ask questions and be humble about it, you can all rise together.
Honestly, at this point, I feel like everything that I've learned as an author has been because of friendships that I've built with other authors. So even like I took a little course on self-publishing, but I wouldn't have known about that course unless another author friend had
Mm,
recommended it to me. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And even like Abigail, she was in the Shattered Tales as well. She got on Zoom and helped all of there were a few of us who were debuts in the group, debut
yeah.
authors, and she, like, walked us through how to go through KDP and everything. It was so generous that she just gave her time and taught us how to do that, and it's if you're too busy comparing and feeling bitter about other people's success, you're not able to actually receive that kind of help from them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another thing I feel like with comparison is to realize that everybody is unique. And you also mentioned this earlier. Everybody is in a different season of life. This is something I talk about frequently on my channel is that everyone's in a different season. Some of us, like me right now, I have two little girls at home. I'm not able to write as much. Last year I wrote and published 10 books. And this year I only wrote maybe three.
Even 3 is impressive, so 10 just blows my mind.
So I think it's easy to not only compare yourself to other people, but compare yourself to yourself. And it can become an endless hamster wheel if you just keep doing that. You're never going to find the joy in the journey. And there's that saying that comparison is a thief of joy. And I think that is so true. I love the word enjoy because if you just listen to it, the word, it's like in joy, like I N joy. instead of
Yeah.
being like it's enjoy, it's being in joy in the moment. And when you're comparing, you're really missing out on just the joy of the journey and all that you're learning. And if we can start to look at it in a different perspective and enjoy the season that we're in and be
Mhm.
grateful for all that we're learning, it's going to really help with us not comparing ourselves to others.
Yes. I love, like, what you said about, okay, one year you did $10 and this
Yeah.
year 3. And this has been part of something I've had to overcome with comparison is I have so many author friends who are producing, like, so many books per year, and I'm like, "I need to figure out how to do that."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
at the beginning of 2024, I was like, "I'm gonna write 4 books this year," and I was like, "I can do it. If they can write 10, I can write" not just you, but there were
Yeah.
multiple people writing,
Yeah.
like, that many books, and
Uh-huh.
I was like, "I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna do 4." And no, so far, it's October, and I've written 1, not counting One Must Die. So, I've written this collaborative one plus
Yeah.
another book, and so a little bit this summer, knowing I hadn't finished this book that I wanted to finish back in April, I was feeling really discouraged, like, "Man,
Mhm.
am I having so much trouble, like, just, like, writing quickly?" And I took a moment to think back to about 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, publishing for me, thinking of having a published book still felt like an impossible dream. And I was like, "Okay, at the end of this year, I will have 2 published works." Like,
Mhm.
what a drastic change, and I have a vision for the future. I can't even imagine what the next 5 years are gonna look like. I need to do what I'm able to do. It's good to have some lofty goals for me because
Yeah.
I feel like I need lofty goals to keep momentum, but if I don't have any goals at all, then I don't really move. So have those goals, but to take a moment and be like, "Okay, maybe I didn't hit exactly what my goal was, but look at how far we've come."
Yes, that's so beautiful. I think that's such a great way to look at it. And I think often as authors, you forget that's the best part of the journey, right? It's just easy to look at where we are and really hyper focus on right now. So I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. But then, like you said, look how far you've come. Everyone is different and everyone writes at different paces. I think that's a really important thing to remember. Just because I can write 10 books or whatever in a year, or someone else can write 12 or 20 even, or just 3. Everyone is just at a different pace. And
Mhm.
this quote, I think, really sums up what we should be looking at and focusing on. There has never been anyone exactly like you. There never will be. Never will anyone possess your special individuality and your particular possibilities. In light of these facts, one of the least profitable things we can do is compare ourselves with others. And that's the end of the quote. But I just always on this channel too, and when I'm talking to other authors, I always say there's nobody like you. There's no one that
Mhm.
can write the story that you can write. So it's going to take as long as it's going to take, and that's okay. And there's some things that you can do to speed up the process if you want, but that's the story that you can tell, and it's going to be as long as it takes you to tell it. And so it doesn't, it's not helpful to look at other people and say, she's writing this many words a day. You have different abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay.
Yeah. I read a book earlier this year that was I think the title was How to Write 5,000 Words per Hour or something like that. And I was like calculating in my head, okay, if I could write 5,000 words per hour, this is how much of a book I could write per month. And then I read the book and I was like, okay, this doesn't magically make you write 5,000 words. So it is a lot of great for increasing your
Yeah.
productivity. And also, one of its tips was to try dictating. And I've tried that. It's a little difficult for me because I tend to stumble over my words more when I'm trying to tell a story through dictation versus trying to type. But I'm still might keep trying it. We'll see. But that was another thing of like perspective. Okay, it's I'm not magically going to start writing 5,000 words per hour, but I can continue to learn from those who have figured out how to write faster and just try their different tips, but
Yeah.
also be content with where I am in my season.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree with you. It's do what you can, where you can, and tell a story that you feel inspired and called to write. Okay, so time goes by so fast. We have about 10 minutes left. So, do you have any examples, either in your journey, someone else's, or in the scriptures of comparison? And how do we overcome that? How did they overcome that?
So I've actually asked some authors in a community that I'm connected with about their journeys with comparison, and I got a lot of different really great answers, but a few of them shared like that they feel like this is something that most authors are always going to be working to overcome. And so I talked to a few authors who at this point have published like 20 books, 30 books, and more than one of them shared how they keep asking the question, so at what point do you feel like a legitimate author? And
Yeah.
they were sharing, in a sense, like you never fully reach that. But the thing that helps is to just continue to plug into community and continue to learn and grow from one another.
I do want to say that, like you said, it's going to always be a lifelong thing. And I think a big reason for that is as authors, we have to put ourselves out there on social media. And as we
Mhm.
all know, social media is a highlight reel of people's lives. They're just showing the best things. They're not showing you all behind the scenes, the imperfections, and the journey that took to get to where they are. You're just seeing the best, everything. I got an orange tiger on Amazon. I'm a #1 new release. I got this and this award. I'm now a New York Times bestseller. You're only seeing all these highlight reels. We don't really get the behind the scenes. We don't get the ugly, hard parts of it because writing is work. It's still something
Mhm.
that we have to do. You have to sit down and work. I think when we can get to that point where we look at social media or see other people's success, when you can look at other people and be happy for them, is truly when you have stopped comparing yourself. And I think one thing that can really help with that, of course, is prayer, is to be able to see other people as God sees them and to be able to see yourself as God sees you. Because you, like I said earlier, are a child of God. You have your own gifts and talents. You have your own strengths and weaknesses, and they do too. And I think when you're starting to compare and you go on social media, you see all the highlight reels, it's important to see them that they're a child of God doing the best that they can do. And I'm happy for them. And I wish them success too.
I thought I'd share one of my author friends wrote this, and I just feel like it really sums up a lot of the things we've been saying concisely. She
Yeah.
said, looking at the results of others and seeing it not as they can and I can't, but more as, wow, look what is possible. This is a really good mindset shift. She said, I also have to remind myself constantly that their life is not my life. The person who can write more words or manage XYZ better isn't dealing with the same circumstances. I have one friend who makes a lot of money writing, but she also works way more hours than me and has one kid and a lot of family support. Everyone has a lot on their plate, but some people just have smaller plates.
Oh, I totally agree. That goes back to the seasons things. We're all in different periods and time and seasons. I've really enjoyed this discussion. I can't believe it's already almost over. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think I've already touched on it, but I shared how I first started struggling with comparison when I started getting into a tighter knit community. But it's also that community that has helped me overcome comparison. I started in this giant Facebook group where I knew everyone and then got down to a small group of like minded writers who are in the same season of life as me and had the same dreams and goals. And because of that community, I basically got to be a part of the Shattered Tales and got to also be a part of the One Must Die collaboration as well. And I learned even how to be a better manager of my time to actually complete more work, and I learned about the indie writing process and found the right podcast to help me learn more, and YouTube channels and books and courses that would help improve my writing skills and put me on a good publishing path. And I even learned how to use a newsletter and how to find newsletter subscribers and how to be consistent with that. And just those things that are so important for being able to sustain a writing career. And none of them would have been possible without community. So I would just encourage anybody that if they're struggling with comparison, take a minute and say, who are the people in my life that I can try to build deeper friendships with who are going after the same things I'm going after? And we can be mutual support for one another.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just feel really blessed to have met you and so many of our other friends. And like you said, the easier it is to compare yourself, but it's once you start learning how to cheerlead other people, it becomes such a great support group and you learn so much from each other. And it's just like already as authors, we're already so isolated and it's a very lonely job. But when you can
Yeah.
have a community of other authors, then it really helps and it can really encourage you. All right. So thank you so much for coming on here. I do want to end really quick with a scripture. We should look ultimately to our Savior, Jesus Christ, and He can teach us how we can just be not only better people, but as we become better people, become better authors. And there's a scripture. He says, "Really, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works I do, shall he do also." And so just remember that in anything we do, we just always want to emulate our Savior and shine His light through our works. And I think as we build communities, we can also spread that light and just really what this world needs, more light. And so I just want to encourage you guys to do that. Okay, so Lydia, thank you so much for being on this. I really appreciate you. I've loved hearing all of your thoughts. And if you guys like this sort of content, please consider subscribing. Go ahead and like the video. If you guys have any advice on how you overcome comparison, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And I will have guests on here every so often. And if you want, if you don't follow Lydia, please do. She's awesome. I'll link her social media and her books below. Other than that, thank you guys again for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Aloha.